From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. I am Ben Hall. Good opportunity tonight, good show tonight. This is a chance to get free advice, free legal advice when it comes to medical malpractice. So, do you think you have been wronged in some way when you have gone to the hospital or visited a doctor? This is an opportunity for you to share your story and get some advice along those lines. Happy to have with us Clint Kelly, attorney, medical malpractice attorney. Thank you for being here once again.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, so as we talk about medical malpractice, how do we define that? What would you say?
Probably the best explanation for that would be a really bad medical mistake that causes a really bad injury. If you have those two components, then you have a potential claim against a physician or a hospital.
And how often do these kinds of things happen?
I think they happen a lot. I think there's some statistics that show that maybe only 20% of people will come forward with claims or even have them investigated. So 8 out of 10 people will either shrug it off or they don't know their rights, or they're simply too embarrassed to come forward because of what's happened to them. And so I think it's fairly prevalent, and the American Medical Association estimated that 98,000 people are the victims of medical malpractice each year in America.
When you are looking at, when someone comes to you, what are some of the things you are looking for when you say, okay, this is something I can move forward with, or this is maybe not something I can move forward with?
Well, the classic situation would be a patient who comes to the hospital with chest pain and is misdiagnosed with indigestion. I had a case about 10 years ago where that very thing happened at a rural hospital. He was sent home with what they call well, they gave him a GI cocktail. You swallow it, it eases the pain in your stomach. He was sent home with some indigestion pills, and the following morning he was getting in the car with his wife and had a massive heart attack and died right there in front of her in the car.
Wow.
When I investigated the case, it became apparent to me from the medical records he did not get an EKG, which would be standard of care in any hospital these days. Did not get nitroglycerin tablets as well to try to see if that would resolve the pain, because if the pain corresponds to nitroglycerin tablets, and that's an indication it's a heart attack. But that's probably the most obvious case. There are many other cases that may not be so obvious, and that's where I need an expert. I'll use the services of a nurse consultant many times to go through the medical records and organize a chronology or a timeline for me, and she will also give me her opinions as to whether or not she believes there's been violations of rules. We call them standard of care in medicine. And then after that nurse has given me her opinion, I will then go to a medical expert to determine whether or not that medical expert will sign on the case and agree that there has been a bad medical mistake and that therefore a lawsuit should proceed.
And what is the time frame? I know that there's a statute of limitations on this, right? And so if you're thinking about this, how long do you have?
Probably the most important thing I want everyone to know who sees this show is in Tennessee we have the tightest statute of limitations in the country. You have 1 year from the date that you discover you've been injured to file your lawsuit, or else your claim will be barred. You will not get your day in court. Many people have contacted me, even with good cases, Ben, that I would like to take, but they simply waited too long. One of the common excuses that I get is where a doctor tells the patient after the patient's been injured, let's give it some time and see if you get better. Let's give it a year. Come back. No. Yeah, let's wait for a year and see if it gets better, and then it doesn't get better within a year. The patient gets frustrated, goes and gets a second opinion from another doctor who says, you know, I can't do anything for you. And then that patient calls me up, and unfortunately I have to say I can't do anything for you because you've waited too long to come see me.
1 year statute of limitations. And what do you think, are we seeing more of this? I don't know, is it the result of maybe nurses, doctors, whatever, being overworked, tired, negligent in some way, or it's not ill will towards someone? I mean, you don't find ill will. You're finding what? That people are, there's just so much going on now that it's easy to overlook something, or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's never ill will, Ben. I mean, you know, when you are on the road and you take your eyes off the road, you're rearing the car in front of you, you're not trying to hurt that person, but few would disagree you're being careless when you're driving, and therefore you're accountable for the injuries that you caused to the car that you hit. I think in medicine, and I've been debating this in my own mind and talking to some doctors about this, I think what's happening in medicine is the sheer volume of patients combined with what I consider to be basically a delegation or downsizing of authority to nurse practitioners, physician assistants, what they call physician extenders, making more and more critical decisions that were traditionally reserved to medical doctors, and simply assembly line medicine. It's become more of a business, I think, than it was years ago as a profession, and so the margin for error just shrinks tighter and tighter, and it always seems that it's that one additional shortcut that a doctor or nurse takes is the one that comes back and bites them. And so I think this is you asked whether we're seeing an increase in these cases. We are going to see greater and greater number of cases, particularly in Nashville as the population swells, and I'm wondering if the hospitals and the physicians and nurses can keep up with that population, at least for the time being.
And I guess what is the biggest mistake people make when they come to you? I guess waiting a year, that's a big one.
Oh yeah.
Documentation, do they need that, or can you get that? Do they need to keep that, or what do you recommend that they do, and what's a big mistake people make?
Well, as far as keeping records are concerned, the hospital is supposed to keep the patient's records. The hospital has a charting system. Nowadays, in most hospitals, it's done electronically where they type in information. As far as keeping a record, if a patient or a patient's relative believes that something is happening that's inappropriate for their loved one or for themselves, take pictures, write notes. And probably the most important thing that I tell people, if you're going to the hospital, you make sure you have a friend or relative there with you 24 hours while you're in the hospital, because that can be the difference between life and death. Where a nurse may come in and have the wrong medication, and you ask the nurse, what are you giving them? And then the nurse may discover, oh, I got the wrong meds. Or you ask about treatment, or maybe clear up something about the patient's history. Those can be life-saving measures. And my understanding is healthcare providers like that. They like to be challenged because they don't want to make a mistake any more than anyone else. But in terms of the clients, the biggest mistake they make is they don't know their rights. And when they don't know their rights, they get burned. They get burned first by the medical system, and then they're going to get burned by the legal system. And that's probably the most painful part of my business, is telling clients, I'm sorry you waited too late to come see me.
Well, let's go to the phones. Let's go to Denise. Hello, Denise.
Hello?
Hi, what's on your mind? Go right ahead.
Hey, hi. Listen, I can't hear that well on this phone. I'm so sorry. But my question is, listen, I was super, super sick one winter. And I went to a particular hospital. I went through the emergency room. And when the doctor came in, they kind of talked to me a little bit, kind of looked at me a little bit. They told me nothing was wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm throwing up. I'm sick. I'm letting them know. I'm 40-something years old. I know when I'm sick. Well, they told me nothing was wrong. They would not treat me. They sent me home. When I went out to the lobby, the clerk out there gave me a number to a walk-in clinic. When I went to the walk-in clinic, they treated me that day with pneumonia. I stayed sick almost 3 months. I was so sick on different medications and everything. When I went back to get information from that emergency room, they told me I was never there. When I tried to find out who the doctor was who saw me, they said, we have no record of you at all.
Wow. So you went in with pneumonia, and they said you're fine.
At 5:30-something in the morning with pneumonia. And they tried to give me some medication for my stomach because they saw me. They knew that I was in the bathroom throwing up. So they said, oh, we'll give you this medicine for your stomach, but other than that, there's nothing wrong with you. And they sent me home. They would not treat me at all. I even asked for another doctor. And so another person came in. I don't know if it was a doctor or a nurse, but another person came in. I'm explaining my whole situation to them.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about all this. What do you think about
Well, she raised a whole host of issues. The first issue that I think is most important in this is what people probably don't understand, which is there's a federal law. It's called EMTALA, E-M-T-A-L-A, which is an acronym for the Emergency Medicine Stabilization Act. And what it means is that every patient who goes to a hospital that is funded by the Medicare Medicaid system, which is virtually everyone now, has the right, or the hospital has the obligation, to stabilize that patient. You can't just say nothing's wrong with you and just send them home without actually performing an exam. There has to be a examination and testing performed before you make any decision about whether there's something wrong with that patient. What she's describing to me sounds like that didn't happen to her. It sounds like she went to this hospital and was just completely blown off. Now, whether she actually got a proper exam or not, I don't know. I haven't encountered a situation in my practice yet where a patient went to a hospital and there was absolutely no record of the patient going there. So what she's talking about is something extremely unusual, and I think it sounds like she's having some real difficulties, or at least has over the last 3 months, but pneumonia is treatable. It sounds like she'll make a recovery, but that's disturbing that she didn't get stabilized and treated at that first hospital because federal law requires it.
And it really kind of points to what you were saying, just they're overwhelmed. So many hospitals, doctors, whatever, are overwhelmed.
Yeah, but Ben, that's no excuse. I mean, you know, hire more staff. I mean, most of your hospitals now have sufficient funding to get more staff hired and have proper management. In fact, some hospitals I see cut their staff, cut their nurses, and require more nurses to do more work for a greater number of patients. And it's just a simple matter of numbers. I mean, either you're going to treat everybody like you should treat them, or you shouldn't be treating anybody. And I think even doctors would agree with that. And so being overwhelmed, I don't think that's the fault of the necessarily the staff, but that could be the fault of the owners of the hospitals and some of these clinics.
Certainly not the fault of the patients.
No.
All right, we have to take a break. If you want to call, there's the number 615-737-PLUS. 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.